Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now guys, in this video we're going to be addressing a question that has been agitating the minds of Nigerians since 2015. It is indeed a question that you would have given some consideration to as well, and that question is simply this: is Abba Kyari Nigeria's de facto president? So that's the headline, and that is what we're going to be addressing in this video. So again, the headline is Abba Kyari Nigeria's de facto president. So now let's get into it. Before the global situation came to assume the global proportion that it has now, the major trending issue was the celebrated spat between the National Security Advisor (NSA) to President Buhari, Major General Babagana Mongono retired, and the Chief of Staff to the President, Abba Kyari. In a memo which was leaked to the media, the National Security Advisor had drawn attention to the Chief of Staff's penchant to hold unauthorized meetings with service chiefs and heads of security agencies, which was clearly out of his purview, and to warn the latter to stay clear of matters concerning the workings of the National Security Advisor. Tellingly, the memo stated that the Chief of Staff had no authorization from the President to dabble into issues bordering on security in the country and was working out of his depth in doing so. In the wake of the ferociously raging global situation, there was a leaked letter purporting to come from Abba Kyari informing the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, of the refusal of some members of the House who had returned from overseas trips to submit themselves to the necessary health checks at the airport. The Chief of Staff had written the letter following a formal complaint to him by the Minister of Health, Osage Ehanere. While the substance of the letter itself is quite a serious one that should concern us, we must, however, not lose sight of the equally germane issues surrounding it. First of all, the letter emanating from the Chief of Staff was a clear breach of the established protocol and procedures for such correspondence. It is simply not the place of the Chief of Staff, who is a personal employee of the President, to write directly to the head of another independent arm of the government. Secondly, as if that was not enough infraction in itself, the Chief of Staff did not indicate in the letter that he was directed or instructed by his principal to write the letter, which is the norm in such correspondence. The tone and nuance of the letter smacks of a direct instruction to the person and office which, going by order of official ranking, are higher than his office. But as it has even come to light now, the Chief of Staff himself is guilty of the same infraction. He was pointing at the members of the House of Representatives for, upon his return from overseas tours of Germany and Egypt, he did not submit himself to the now mandatory health checks at the airports and went straight into both official and non-official functions, endangering himself and others who came into contact with him in the process. For a man who is at the nexus of government activities, this is a reckless, thoughtless act of arrogance which should have been swiftly sanctioned by his principal, President Muhammadu Buhari. But as in the earlier case of the kerfuffle with the NSA, the National Security Advisor, President Buhari opted for the first line of least resistance in treating the matter of his Chief of Staff's serial trampling of official protocols and procedures. The position of the Chief of Staff to the President, it must be stated, is not recognized by the Constitution. He is a personal appointee and was not required to swear an oath of office or to be screened by the National Assembly before his appointment. Yet, in obvious contempt of the Constitution of the country, which is the grand norm of our laws and the people of the country that he swore to uphold, President Buhari, either by act of omission or commission, has outsourced to his Chief of Staff, who is not constitutionally recognized or accountable, the functions of supervising and interfering in affairs of constitutionally and statutorily recognized and accountable officers of the government. The apparent unlimited powers given by President Buhari to his chief of staff have emboldened him to virtually subsume all offices in the presidency from the vice president down under him. The vice president is now a mere spectator in a government of which he was on a joint ticket. The secretary to the government of the Federation, SGF, who ought to be at the center of the administration and is recognized as such by the Constitution, has been rendered largely redundant. The NSA, as we have seen, who is a professional security operative, is critically at the nexus of the security operations in the country, is routinely shunted aside. Ministers who have to go through rigorous screening to determine their eligibility and suitability to serve the country. In a clear case of conflict of interest, he sits on the board of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC, which is supervised by the President Buhari as a substantive minister in addition to the current position he occupies. Having taken over all of the functions of the executive arm of government under his wing, Kyari, as can be seen in his letter to the Speaker, is now inching towards gobbling up the legislature and perhaps the judiciary after that, in attempting to amass all of these powers to himself and seemingly being allowed to get away with it by his principle. Kyari has moved from the patsy we thought he was to a dangerous usurper of the constitutional powers of the president. The question to ask then is, who is Nigeria's de facto president? That should be, is he Nigeria's de facto president? Nigerians first elected President Buhari as a de jure president in 2015 and re-elected him, well, that's a matter of opinion, and re-elected him in 2019. Kyari, his chief of staff, was never a relevant factor in both elections, but no sooner had the elections been won by those who slogged for it than he emerged from the closet by default to become, for all practical purposes, the de facto president of Nigeria. Nigeria, it seems, has two presidents for the price of one at a 50% discount. In the overriding public interest, he has to be stopped before he precipitates a needless constitutional crisis. So now that question, of course, is a question that has been ringing around the senses of all thinking Nigerians pretty much since 2015. That, look, we all know that Malam Buhari is incapable, is too old, and is too mentally frail, is frail in all manners to be the president of Nigeria. We all know this. We all know, of course, as well, that Malam Buhari doesn't really trust Yemi Osinbajo. It's nothing personal. Yemi Osinbajo is a Yoruba man, so he wouldn't trust him anyway. Yemi Osinbajo is from a different religion. He wouldn't trust him anyway. But what totally then damns him, as if he wasn't damned enough, Yemi Osinbajo is Tinubu's boy, so he doesn't trust him at all. Malam Buhari has never, in his mind, left Daura. Malam Buhari has no capacity to leave the Fulaniness that permeates his mind. He's a very simple man of a binary thought process, which is his tribe and his religion. And what caters to those two elements the most is Abba Kyari. Abba Kyari is of his tribe and is of his religion and is also a relative of his as well. So Abba Kyari, of course, knows that Malam Buhari is of frail body of mind, and he knows that he can easily manipulate him, and he has been manipulating him, of course, since 2015. And during the inauguration, not during Buhari's inauguration, but rather during the swearing in of the ministers in this round, this 2019 round, now this second term, during that period, Malam Buhari actually stated to the ministers explicitly that they should always access him via Abba Kyari. So effectively, he surrendered his powers then to this Abba Kyari person. So Malam Buhari is a very parochial man, is a very tribal man, is a very suspicious man, and a very insecure man. So if this guy, Abba Kyari, has succeeded in capturing Malam Buhari's mind, which he has done, and is easily done, by the way, because he falls within the catchment area of what the belief system of Buhari is, and is a lot smarter than Buhari. So if he was a foreigner now, let's say a Yoruba man or an Igbo man, then he wouldn't have that access to his mind, because he would have guarded himself against somebody like Abba Kyari, but Abba Kyari, of course, falls within his catchment area of trust, which is tribe and religion. And then, of course, then Abba Kyari, having then accessed via that door, has now captured in its entirety the mind of this guy. So once he has captured in its entirety the mind of this guy, he has then seeded suspicions against all others in that very feeble mind of Buhari, so that Buhari then second guesses anything that comes outside, anything that Abba Kyari has seeded into his mind, so that then if anybody goes to him, he would then sound out Abba Kyari to say, this is what this person is saying, what do you think? And say, well, you have to remember, well, you can make your decision, no, but you have to remember that this guy is this, that, and the other, and it's this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other. By the time he's done all the talking, he would have manipulated Malam Buhari to make the decision that is of Abba Kyari's will. So Abba Kyari is effectively Nigeria's president in all ways other than by name. This is really what his role is. But now, this guy is now in lockdown in Lagos by virtue of the global situation that we're in now. So this is now interesting times. But that's the simple question. Is Abba Kyari the de facto president of Nigeria? What says you? Come share thoughts about all this with me in the comment section. But before you do that, click on the red subscribe button so it turns gray. Bell button notifies you every time I drop a new video. Then simple question, come answer me. Who do you think is the president of Nigeria? Abba Kyari and Malam Buhari? I don't really think anybody really thinks that Malam Buhari is the president of Nigeria. But really, come, let's have a discussion about all this in the comment section. So I'll leave you here. Carry this conversation on with you in the comment section. But here, I say peace.